Trump tilted his head, still smirking. "You got something to say, darling. I'll give you 30 seconds. That's more than your party ever gave me." More laughter from the crowd, a few claps. But Jasmine didn't grab for a mic, didn't march up to the stage to steal the spotlight. She just turned a little, facing the crowd more than him, and spoke. Her voice was clear, steady, like she'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head. "I didn't come here to steal the show. I came to ask a question." Man, it was one of those afternoons in Phoenix where the heat just slaps you in the face. We're talking blistering over 100 degrees, the kind of day where the asphalt shimmers and you're sweating through your shirt before you even step outside. But inside the convention center, it was a whole different kind of heat. The crowd was electric-packed, shoulder to shoulder, hollering and cheering like they were at a Super Bowl game. Patriotic tunes blasted through the speakers, heavy on the drums, getting everyone hyped. Signs bobbed up and down, red, white, and blue, everywhere you looked. People were chanting slogans, waving flags, the whole 9 yards. And there, right in the middle of it all, was Donald Trump, up on stage, owning the moment like he always does. He pointed out into the sea of faces, grinning wide, and belted out his favorite line, "We are the real America." The place erupted. Applause, cheers, whistles. It was deafening. You couldn't help but feel the energy, even if you weren't all in on the message. But then out of nowhere, something changed. It was subtle at first, like a ripple in a pond before the big wave hits. Near the back of the room, a woman in a sharp blue blazer stood up. Didn't make a fuss, didn't wave her arms around, just stood. Most folks didn't even clock it right away, too busy cheering or snapping pics on their phones. But then a staffer off to the side of the stage caught sight of her. He leaned in real quick, whispering something into the tiny mic clipped to Trump's collar. I couldn't hear it from where I was, but later I found out he said she's not on the list. Trump's eyes flicked out over the crowd, narrowing just a bit. Then he smirked, not the warm, friendly kind, but the kind you flash when you're sizing someone up like you can already smell a fight coming. "Oh, look at this," he said into the mic, his voice dripping with that signature mix of humor and edge. "We got a visitor from the other side of the aisle. Here to take notes, sweetheart." The crowd ate it up, laughing and whooping. A couple of guys near me pulled out their phones to record, figuring this was about to be some viral moment. But the woman, she didn't crack a smile, didn't even flinch. She just took a step forward, then another, real calm, real composed. No security badge, no name tag, nothing to show who she was. Just this air of purpose, like she knew exactly why she was there. Later, I'd learn her name, Jasmine Crockett, congresswoman, lawyer, and, oh yeah, uninvited guest. Trump tilted his head, still smirking. "You got something to say, darling. I'll give you 30 seconds. That's more than your party ever gave me." More laughter from the crowd, a few claps. But Jasmine didn't grab for a mic, didn't march up to the stage to steal the spotlight. She just turned a little, facing the crowd more than him, and spoke. Her voice was clear, steady, like she'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head. "I didn't come here to steal the show. I came to ask a question." Dead silence. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the kind that sneaks up on you, heavy and real. Security started moving and one guy touched his earpiece. Another took a step toward her. But Trump raised a hand, waving them off with a chuckle. Let her speak. Might be fun. Jasmine didn't smile back, didn't raise her voice or beg for applause. She just looked around the room, slow and deliberate, and asked, "How many of you lost someone during Hurricane Harvey?" Heads turned, eyebrows furrowed. A couple of folks near me glanced at each other like they weren't sure they heard her right. She kept going, her voice still, even still steady. "How many of you are still waiting for help that was promised, but never came?" Now the room was truly quiet. No cameras flashing, no one clapping. This wasn't some campaign slogan or a cheap shot. It wasn't even a protest. It was just a question, one that cut through all the noise like a knife through butter. People started shifting in their seats, unsure what to say or do. A woman a few rows ahead clutched her purse a little tighter. A guy in a red baseball cap folded his arms, staring down at his boots. Up on stage, Trump shifted behind the podium. He opened his mouth like he was going to fire back with something snappy, but nothing came out. And honestly, what could he say? This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about memory, about pain, about something real that had happened to people in this very room. And she'd just said it out loud. No insults, no drama, just the one thing nobody had dared to bring into a place like this: accountability. Jasmine didn't step closer to the stage, didn't even look at Trump. She kept her eyes on us, the crowd, and spoke again. No mic, no shouting, just pure conviction. "I'm not here to perform. I'm here to ask a question." Those words landed hard. Trump blinked, caught off guard for just a split second. He leaned back, almost amused, like he was still in control. Security started moving again, two guys in black suits weaving through the rows of chairs. One of them had his hand on his belt waiting for the go-ahead, but Trump just chuckled into the mic. "Now let her talk. Give her 30 seconds. Let's have a little entertainment." The crowd tensed up. Some folks laughed, others didn't. A few more phones popped up recording every second. But Jasmine, she didn't budge. She stood there, feet planted like she belonged, even though nobody had invited her. "I'm not here for entertainment," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "I'm here because someone needs to ask what happened." Even from where I was sitting, you could feel the shift. People weren't just looking at Trump anymore. They were looking at her, not because she was yelling or famous, but because she was still. In a room built for noise, chants, cheers, applause, that stillness was louder than anything. It was like the air itself got heavier. The first security guard got close, hesitating a bit. He leaned in and muttered, "Ma'am, we need to escort you out." She turned her head just enough to meet his eyes, still calm as ever. "If I leave without asking, they'll never hear the answer." Her tone wasn't defiant, just certain. The guard didn't push, didn't grab her arm. Something about her voice made him pause, like he knew this moment mattered more than his orders. Trump leaned into the podium, trying to pull the crowd back to him. "All right then," he said, keeping his tone light, almost playful. "Ask your question. Make it quick, though. We've got a country to save." A few chuckles rippled through the room, but Jasmine didn't bite. She didn't even look at him directly. Instead, she turned her gaze back to us working-class folks, veterans, moms and dads, retirees, and gave a single nod. Then, with quiet precision, she said, "Let's talk about what was promised and what was never delivered." In that moment, those 30 seconds didn't feel like some generous gift. They felt like the start of something unstoppable. She didn't move forward, didn't ask for a mic or a podium or a pat on the back. She just stood there and repeated her question, "How many of you lost someone during Hurricane Harvey?" There was no anger in her voice, just something worse for a room like this: truth. "How many of you are still waiting for help that was promised but never came?" The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was frozen. The kind that creeps in when someone finally says what nobody else had the guts to. A guy in the third row lowered his phone, stopping the recording. A woman near the front stopped waving her flag. Two teenagers off to the side exchanged a look but didn't say a word. Jasmine's eyes scanned the crowd, not hunting for a fight, but for recognition. And you could see it, people realizing she wasn't making this up. This was real. Trump shifted again at the podium, adjusting the mic, clearing his throat. But Jasmine wasn't done. "I'm not here to argue," she said, her voice steady as ever. "I'm here because too many people in this room have been told their pain is just politics." Heads turned. You could feel it building, subtle at first, a finger tapping on a knee, a shift in posture, eyebrows knitting together. Something real was stirring under the surface, something no amount of slogans or flags could cover up. She didn't call out names, didn't point fingers at who was to blame. She just let the question hang there. And in a room built for spectacle, the lack of a punchline hit harder than any zinger ever could. "I know this isn't where I'm supposed to be," Jasmine said, her voice softening just a touch. "But if this room really believes in America, then we should all be asking the same thing." She held that pause like a lawyer holding back the final blow in a closing argument. And then just for a second, her eyes met Trump's. No glare, no smirk, just a look. And in that look was everything she didn't say out loud. A question he didn't want asked. A memory some hoped had faded. A truth that wasn't supposed to walk into this room, let alone be spoken. But here it was. And now we were all waiting to see what came next. Jasmine reached into her blazer pocket, slow and deliberate, not rushed or dramatic. She pulled out a single folded piece of paper, worn, creased, like it had been read 100 times. She held it up, not high for show, just enough for the front rows to see. "This," she said, "is a federal emergency budget report from 2020. It details a $47 million allocation for hurricane relief in Texas." She paused, letting that sink in. But the money never got there. A murmur rippled through the crowd, soft but growing. She unfolded the paper slowly. No explanation, no follow-up. Just gone. She flipped to the last page, pointing to the bottom. And right here on the authorization line, there's a signature. Just initials scribbled, barely legible. No name, no title, no transparency. She looked at us then, back at the stage, and asked, "Who signed it?" Nobody answered. The air felt thicker now, like we were all holding our breath. "Who looked at this?" She continued, giving the paper a small nod, while people drowned, while families slept in gyms, while kids waited for help that never came. No shouting. No finger-pointing, just a question carrying the weight of everyone who couldn't be here to ask it themselves. That piece of paper wasn't just numbers, it was lives. For a second, it looked like Trump might fire back. He stepped forward, gripped the podium with both hands, cleared his throat like he was ready to crack a joke and swing the room back to his side. But nothing came out. The silence got there first, not awkward or confused, but deliberate. The kind that happens when people are actually thinking. Jasmine didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there still holding the document. Then from the front row, a voice broke through, not hers. A man in a red baseball cap, one of those hats, leaned forward in his seat and said real quiet, "She's right." Heads turned. He nodded once. "I was in Houston that year. I remember the flood. We didn't get a dime." His voice cracked just a bit like he was pulling up a memory he'd buried deep. Another murmur rolled through the room, but not in protest or defense. It was uncertainty. Something was unraveling, and nobody wanted to be the first to admit they felt it. Trump leaned back from the mic, scanning the crowd like he was waiting for someone to jump in, laugh it off, break the tension. Nobody did. A few seats over a woman lowered her campaign sign, setting it gently in her lap. On the left side, a veteran in uniform stared at Jasmine, not with anger, but curiosity. And way in the back, the cameras that had been locked on Trump, they'd shifted. Now they were on her. Still silent, unshaken, Jasmine didn't gloat or smirk. This wasn't about winning. It was about naming what had been ignored. In that moment, the rally wasn't a rally anymore. It felt like a courtroom not with a judge but with a witness. And the jury, that was us, everyone listening. She didn't wait for permission or applause. Didn't bow or wave. She just turned and started walking out. Nobody stopped her, not security, not staff, not even Trump. 'Cause in that moment, even he knew nothing he could say would match the weight of what she'd already dropped. As she headed for the exit, the silence followed her. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the crowd, there was a sound, a single clap, then another, slow, deliberate, scattered, like people weren't sure if it was okay but couldn't help themselves. It wasn't applause for a performance or defiance. It was recognition, a quiet nod that for once someone had walked into a room not to speak for us, but to speak to us, to say what we'd felt for years but didn't know how to ask. As Jasmine stepped out into the dry Arizona air, the moment didn't end. It was just getting started. Outside, cameras were already rolling. Phones buzzed with notifications. Clips of her holding that paper. The frozen look on Trump's face, the guy in the red hat nodding, it spread like wildfire. Within an hour, headlines were popping up across the country. One question, one room. One silence America didn't expect. But the real impact wasn't in the headlines. It was in the comment sections, the text chains, the quiet talks over kitchen tables. That night, folks didn't argue over party lines or yell about loyalty or red versus blue. They asked the same thing Jasmine had, who signed it. And then came the deeper questions, worded different ways in different cities, but all boiling down to the same thing. If they could forget us during the flood, what else have they swept under the rug while we weren't looking? 'Cause this wasn't just about $47 million or Hurricane Harvey. It was about all the moments that vanish in the shadows of bureaucracy, all the pain buried under flashy headlines, all the signatures with no names attached. Jasmine hadn't brought anger into that room. She'd brought something way more dangerous to systems built on silence, a mirror. When she asked her question, it wasn't to score points. It was to make sure the forgotten weren't just victims or stats, but people whose stories deserved answers. Later, when a reporter tracked her down and asked why she'd gone to that rally uninvited, Jasmine kept it simple. "I didn't want to speak, but I couldn't stay silent." That line, it became a banner, a poster, a whisper passed around at community meetings. 'Cause in a country drowning in noise, the voice that didn't shout was the one that stuck. Sometimes all it takes is one woman standing still to remind a room that truth doesn't yell. It waits for someone brave enough to say, "I'm not here to perform. I'm here to ask what you hope nobody ever would." And that's when silence finally speaks. Cameras outside were already rolling. Phones buzzed. Clips were uploading. Screenshots of her holding the paper. The frozen look on Trump's face. The man in the red hat nodding, all of it spread like a wildfire. Within the hour, headlines flashed across the country. One question, one room, one silence America didn't expect. But the real impact wasn't in the headlines. It was in the comment sections, the text messages, the quiet conversations at kitchen tables. People didn't argue over party lines that night. They didn't yell about loyalty or blame or red versus blue. They asked the same thing Jasmine had asked. Who signed it? And then came the deeper questions, spoken in different words, in different cities, in different tones. If they could forget us during the flood, what else have they erased while we weren't watching? Because this wasn't just about $47 million. It wasn't even just about Hurricane Harvey. It was about all the moments that disappeared in the shadows of bureaucracy, all the pain swept under headlines, all the signatures that never had names. Jasmine hadn't brought outrage into that room. She'd brought something much more dangerous to systems built on silence, a mirror. And when she asked her question, she didn't ask it to score points. She asked it so that for once the forgotten could be seen not as victims, not as numbers, but as people whose stories were worth demanding answers for. When asked later by a reporter why she had gone to that rally uninvited, Jasmine simply replied, "I didn't want to speak, but I couldn't stay silent." That sentence became a banner, a poster, a whisper passed from one community meeting to another. Because in a country overwhelmed by shouting, the voice that didn't rise became the one that stayed. And sometimes all it takes is one woman standing still to remind a room that the truth doesn't shout. It waits for someone brave enough to say, "I'm not here to perform. I'm here to ask what you were hoping no one ever would." And that's when silence finally speaks.